For hanging out with us on this hump day. Derek Gunn, Rob Ellis.
On what day?
Hanging out with you. Hump day. Good to be with you as always, my friends. We got our NFL segment coming up at 2 o'clock. Mentioned Scott Lauber at 2:30. All right, Derek. So let's look at a couple things here. Brian Flores coached under Bill Belichick. Belichick generally is someone who is pretty creative with the way he goes about things defensively. If you watched last week, you paid attention to the game last week, the Patriots blitzed about 42% of the time on Jalen Hurts. Now, here are his numbers. He was 7 for 13, 57 yards, a touchdown, and 2 sacks versus the blitz. So, I don't know, kind of mixed numbers, which is kind of, his game was kind of mixed. He had a couple moments and then didn't play great, beyond that. So, I would assume you're going to see a lot of that. Danielle Hunter, who we talked about a little bit earlier, has 2 career sacks against the Eagles. He's definitely the guy, when you look at them defensively, especially the interior, who you start with, Derek. He's a guy you got to protect. And the offensive line for the Birds, particularly the tackles, have to be better because I don't think left or right tackle had their best game.
This is a pride thing now because both Mailata and Lane Johnson, who basically coached up Mailata, in a lot of ways outside of Stoutland, take pride in the fact of being able to hold their own, to allow their quarterback to do a lot of the things he does. They look at the game field, they understand they didn't play their best game coming out of the gate. And I attribute it to rust, not getting a lot of game reps or not getting any game reps basically in the preseason. They understand, even though it's a short week, this is a pride factor, especially it's a home game in front of their home fans. I'd be shocked if they had a similar game. Now, Minnesota's edge rushers, for the most part, are not great. Danielle Hunter is a good D lineman, but you can contain him. They've got to play better. They have got to play better. They cannot allow this Minnesota defense to think that they can stay on the field with this offense. It's a psychological game as well as a physical game, and you got to win the psychological warfare early. You got to take the heart out of this Minnesota defense early. And I expect Flores. Now, Flores didn't blitz much in that first game against Tampa. Why would you not blitz Baker Mayfield? I don't know.
I don't get that.
He didn't blitz much in that first game. If what we've talked about is true, Brian Flores is a direct disciple of Bill Belichick, even though I'm not comfortable with my personnel yet, because let's face it, this is his first year with this unit, okay? And you've had spring to work with him. You've had training camps to work with him, but you've only had one real game to work with him, so it's still a feeling out process. Who does he trust in certain situations compared to who he doesn't trust, which is a bigger question. If he calls a blitz, is he certain beyond a doubt that the other guys know exactly where they're supposed to be to cover the back end, floating into certain spots to make sure the back end is covered? Don't know that yet. But if I'm Flores, I've got to attack Jalen Hurts. I cannot let that man sit back there and just wait because A.J. Brown's going to kill him underneath. With the corners that the Vikings have, A.J. Brown will kill him. He might have 11 catches by halftime. They don't do something to try to disrupt the flow and the timing of the Eagles offense.
Yeah, I agree. Look, this should be a game where the offense does a lot of things. And look, if they look mediocre to less than mediocre again, then it's time to start worrying a little bit. Do you think we're going to see more RPOs? Do you think we're going to see them look more like the team that we saw last year in terms of the approach?
If we see a similar struggle for this Eagles offense this game, it tells me what we've talked about all summer, that coordinators have had all summer to study this Eagles offense. Now, obviously, you're more worried about studying the tendencies of your first opponent. But for teams that have to play the Eagles early in the season, they've had extended time to study and break down this offense, which tells me that defenses are catching up to what the Eagles are doing. And if that is the case, what is Brian Johnson going to do to counter these measures? Because if it continues to look stagnant and jagged, I guarantee you at some point we're going to find out from somebody on a whisper mill that Nick Sirianni is now calling the plays again. Nick Sirianni is not going to let this go for too long. The first 4 or 5 games you can get by. You look at the opponents they have for the first 4 or 5 games. After that, that's when the real season begins.
Mm-hmm.
And you've got to get this offense back to where it was, because to me now it's going to look like the offense is going to have to carry the defense even more so with this plethora of injuries that they have right now.
Sure. They were going to have to carry the load anyway, I think early, but especially now with some of the injuries that you're talking about. So to me, there is no excuse for this offense not to look really good in this game this week. I think, and I get it. You may look back at that Vikings game against the Bucs last week and say, well, they didn't give a ton up in that game. They didn't, but I don't know that Bucs offense is a juggernaut. You should certainly see the Eagles bounce back. I mean, if you take away the field goals and the takeaway, I mean, it's at 16 points. What did they scored 11 or 12 points, the offense. Yeah. So they need to be better. I mean, plain and simple. They lost last week. Minnesota only gave up 20. I would expect that to look a lot different. That's for sure. I mean, if you can control Danielle Hunter and give Jalen that time, I think Jalen can do a lot of things. And I think if you go back and look at last year, which we'll get into in a minute, but A.J. Brown had 5 catches, 69 yards, Devontae 7 for 80. Quez Watkins had a 53-yard touchdown, a deep one.
Yeah,
their wideouts got loose, and I don't see a whole lot of change in that secondary that's scaring me.
No. Matter of fact, and they lost Eric Kendricks, so they lost a good piece of that brain trust in the middle of that defense as well. So this is a seek and find mission for both teams. A young offensive coordinator for the Eagles who's finding his way and who realizes what he did on Sunday was not good enough to counter the best of the best. Now, Belichick's not coaching this defense, but one of his disciples is. But I always say you can try to emulate, a mentor all you want, but can you do it to his level? Especially when you don't have the same type of personnel that he has. There is no Matthew Judon in this defense.
Yeah.
So that's a big difference. But I guarantee you Flores has talked to Belichick. I guarantee you Flores has studied that Patriots defensive game plan inside and out as he tries to implement some of the same things on a short week. So we're going to see it. We're going to see something we're not expecting a little bit early on. Vikings may try to shoot the gaps, delayed blitzes, or try to blindside blitzes to catch Hurts and Appen. Well, I expect to see some unpredictability from this Vikings defense.
Well, you know what? I was thinking about this really since Nick Sirianni became the head coach. Correct me if I'm wrong. Do you remember the last time the Eagles ran a trick play or a trick play that was really successful? Again, under Sirianni. We know Doug used to do it, Philly special, et cetera, but right. I can't remember.
To be honest with you, I can't either. No. I honestly, I can't.
No, it's strange that you don't ever see that from them.
Yeah, but look, they didn't really need it.
I know. That's
true. What I mean? They were that good, And as even as good as an offense like Kansas City and the 49ers are, they like to run plays of deception. That's a big part of their offense is trying to get defense leaning one way and go back the other way. Whereas the Eagles just lined up and said, "Let me see if you can stop us." We don't think you can stop us. And last year, for the most part, nobody could stop them. Except a couple of games, that Hurts was out. The Saints stopped them. But when you're that good and that deep and versatile, you don't have to use a lot of trickery.
Yeah, it's the same thing as not having to blitz a ton if you're getting home, with your defensive line.
Yeah.
I'm just wondering, maybe it wouldn't be a bad spot here. It might not be a bad spot to try it here on Monday night. Just thought. I was just thinking it, out loud. Looking back. So all right. So here's what they're going to have to deal with. The Eagles, the defense is going to have to deal with. We mentioned Hawkinson. So last year, two stops here. He was in Detroit. He was in Minnesota. 86 catches, 914 yards, 6 touchdowns. So he is definitely going to be a handful. He did not play in the game last year because he was not a Viking at that point.
Right.
But I would assume, especially because the Patriots had success with their tight ends, that he is going to be a huge part of this game plan this week, especially with Dean out of there.
With the potential of facing the pass rush that the Eagles can present, what's the best way to neutralize that?
Quickly.
Quick passes over the middle, quick swing passes, catch those edges coming up, and hopefully you catch a linebacker out of position. That's the best way to neutralize that rush. That's what I expect to see. Now, we know Kirk Cousins is going to take a deep shot at some point, and you better hope Justin Jefferson doesn't get behind your coverage, because he's going to take 2 or 3 deep shots in this game. But for the most part, I'm going to dink and dunk this Eagles defense up and down the field and try to suck the safeties in cheating and try to get the corners creeping up as well, which will tell me is when I can call an audible at the line of scrimmage and try to take a deep shot down the sideline or on a deep post route over the middle of the field. That I expect to see from Kirk Cousins, to be honest.
Well, I just think that here's the good news. Quarterbacks who aren't as mobile, like Cousins, this applies to any quarterback, but especially quarterbacks who aren't as mobile. Get them up the middle. And Jordan Davis and Jalen Carter and Fletcher all had really good games last week. And considering Ed Ingram is not the greatest guard in the world, I think you're going to be able to get pressure up the middle, which is going to flush him left or right, which feeds you right into Reddick and Sweat and Brandon Graham and that crew. You should be able to get home. We know Cousins will hurry throws sometimes if he's under pressure. We know he will fumble. He will. He fumbled last year against the Eagles. He fumbled last week against the Bucs. This should be a multiple turnover kind of game for the Birds.
Yeah, I agree. I'm looking at this Eagles schedule and looking at the quarterbacks they're going to face. Now they've got Baker Mayfield down in Tampa next. Baker will scramble. Sam Howell is athletic. I'm not afraid of a Sam Howell. He's still learning, but he will scramble. Matthew Stafford is similar to a Kirk Cousins.
Yep.
He will only run if he absolutely has to. Zach Wilson will be running for his life when they play the Jets. Tua will take off and run. You got Howell again. Dak Prescott Dak will run, but he doesn't like to run. You know Mahomes will step up and run. You know Josh Allen will take off. Purdy will take off. Dak again. Geno Smith will run. You know Daniel Jones is like having an extra running back in the backfield. And I'm assuming by that time Kyler Murray will be back with Arizona by December 31st. You know he's going to run. You know, he to me, he's more dangerous as a runner than he is as a passer.
Agreed.
So you only have a couple stationary targets that you're going to face this entire season. So the Eagles not only have to start getting that pass rush back to what it was, but it has to be etched in their minds. We have to be disciplined. We can't over pursue a lot of these guys. They did a good job of that last year, but they weren't playing a lot of frontline quarterbacks last year. But against these guys, they potentially are going to play. And who knows? They may have a game where you're not going to play a frontline quarterback, plain and simple. Yeah. You know, Aaron Rodgers, gone for the season. We could have another starter. We don't know what's –
yeah, it's why it's so hard to pick wins and losses, because you just don't know. I mean, everything's changed with the Jets so much, and you're right. And that all went flying out the window. All right, here's the other big thing. The Vikings did not run the ball well last night, and last time the Eagles played, or Sunday and the last time the Eagles played. So on Sunday, Derek, they rushed 17 times for 41 yards. That's 2.4 per carry.
Yep.
They made themselves completely one-dimensional, and this is where letting Dalvin Cook walk potentially bites you here.
Absolutely. Now, the running back who took over for the Vikings, he's a good back, but he's
Madison,
not.
Yeah, Alexander Madison. Yeah.
Madison. Yeah, he's good back, but he's not. He's more of a banger between the tackles. Dalvin Cook, you can line him up outside. He can kill you a number of different ways, and they didn't address the issue really. Yeah. They were confident that what they have in-house already was good enough, but I do believe their lack of rushing prowess was directly related to the injuries they had along the offensive line. And if that is the case, the way Jordan Davis and Jalen Carter played, it plays right into the Eagles. They're not going to be able to run up the middle of the field. They're not, the Vikings. And I think the Eagles are just too fast for them on the outside as well. Madison's not a speed back. So I think you have them right where you want them, which means you can make that Vikings offense one-dimensional, which means that defensive front will have a lot more chances to put Kirk Cousins on the ground.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's where this game is won and lost. It's going to be getting to Cousins certainly on that side of the ball. It's going to be getting to Cousins, forcing into mistakes, make them one-dimensional. That's the other part. Jump on them early like you did last year, and they're not even going to attempt to run the ball. It's going to be trying to get it down the field to the tight end and to Jefferson and to Addison, and then all of a sudden you can really tee off. But if they're getting chunks early, if Madison is able to run the ball early, then they're going to be able to stay honest here. But that's also another thing that you want to be looking at. That's for sure. When it comes to this game, I would say that, and then obviously you go back to the other side with the defensive line is going to be huge. But I'm really worried about the middle of the field here. I can't emphasize that enough. There's no Nakobe Dean. You're looking at your starting linebackers now are Zach Cunningham, who wasn't with the team when camp started, and Christian Ellis, who was a guy who really didn't get an opportunity until the end of last year on special teams as your starting linebackers here.
Yeah, and I'm looking at this stat also, Rob. You look at the breakdown of the Eagles' edge rushers, which is really surprising in a lot of ways here. Where was it here? Okay, edge rushers. Josh Sweat played 59 snaps. Hassan Reddick 58 with that bad thumb. Brandon Graham only 21 snaps. Barnett 16. Nolan Smith played 7 snaps.
It's all. Barnett got more than Smith, huh?
7 snaps. We were talking about this in a meeting. You know, I didn't notice Nolan Smith doing anything, and now I understand why. Is that shoulder bothering him?
Yeah, I would worry about that. You and I
don't
were talking.
Want to create a controversy here.
No, but I mean, this is how little I noticed him. I watched it live. I watched the replay, and you and I were talking before the show, and we both said, "Wait, he was active, right?" And he was active, but he wasn't a part of anything.
Yeah, and I'm thinking, wait a minute, why did he only play 7 snaps?
Yeah.
So now that's something we definitely have. Now I'm looking, it's weird. You look at snap counts and you look at various outlets that give you the snap counts from individuals, and sometimes the numbers differ. So I looked at one site. So now I'm looking at a completely different site, and it says here, let's see. Nolan Smith. Nolan Smith played 9%. Yep, it's consistent. He played 7 snaps, 9% of the snaps. That's it.
That's a low number. And I'd have to really look at the way they parsed it out for Brandon Graham last year to see if that's about where he was last year too. That feels a little light for him as well.
If he's your third guy, he's going to have to play more snaps than that.
I think if they, in hindsight, they would get Goddard involved more. I think they would have gotten Swift involved more. I think maybe you would have saw a little more Brandon Graham and a little bit more Nolan Smith on the other side too. I think Derek, here's what we're seeing. We're seeing 2 new coordinators.
Yep.
And there's growing pains here. Plain and simple.
Yep. And it's going to be trial and error. And luckily the schedule early on is stacked to where they can try a lot of different trial and error things and still overcome whatever weaknesses they might have.
Right.
But the fact that you only played Brandon Graham 21 snaps and Nolan Smith 7 is a little eye-opening to me. You know, Brandon Graham was healthy. How healthy is Nolan Smith? He looked good playing in preseason games.
Right.
Why didn't you give Sweat and Hassan Reddick more of a rest? I'm not to say they weren't effective in what they were doing, but last year it was predicated on. Now, granted, Hassan Reddick played a lot of snaps coming off that edge, but you rotated them in and out to keep them fresher. That wasn't the case this time. And what are you going to have to do now? What are you going to do now if it's Nolan Smith's shoulder? What do you do now when the middle of your linebacking core is out? One of your safeties could be out. Your one of your top corners is out. What do you do now in terms of getting more heat on a Kirk Cousins? You've got to play Brandon Graham more snaps. At least 35, 40 snaps.
Yeah. And one other thing I just want to mention too, when it comes to blitzing, you also want to have somebody who's good at it coming off the edge, whether it's a safety blitz or a corner blitz or a linebacker blitz. I don't know that they have that guy right now. that's the other thing you have to take into account a little bit. So again, this is where it's going to be incumbent upon the defensive line to get the sack, to get home, rather than having to send. Because the other thing is, you don't want to have some of these guys in one-on-one coverages, your safeties, your linebackers with Hawkinson, for example, or something like that. Or if they go 4 wide out, it can be a little sketchy. I think it's just, they're going to play very similar in terms of I think the way they approach it against Minnesota.
Yeah, I'm really concerned with how they're going to try to defend Hawkinson in the middle. Who's going to cover him, to be honest? We haven't even talked about who the Vikings' third receiver is, because Avonte Maddox has to figure into this equation also. You cannot put Maddox and Hawkinson. You cannot. I don't care how fast Maddox is. He's still 5'10" compared to this guy being 6'5".
You can't do that. The size difference is too big. KJ Osborne is not a bad third receiver. That's their third guy. So they'll throw 3 at you that are pretty good. So I'm not, this is the Eagles have a bit of a drop off after their 1-2. I think the Vikings have less of a drop off than the Eagles do with KJ Osborne. Yes. I like KJ Osborne.
I do too. He's not a name that just rolls off your tongue when you talk about top receivers in the game, but he's a reliable receiver.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm looking at him at what he ended up doing last year. So he's all right. So last season he ended up not bad. He had 50 catches, 655 yards, 7 touchdowns. That's good for a third wide receiver.
That's really good for a third wide out. But I think Maddox can handle him.
Yeah, no, I'm good with that too. I'm good with that too. Really, let's face it. It's going to be Jefferson. It's going to be the tight end. I'm not afraid of the running game at all.
Well, don't forget Addison now. It depends on what Addison will be. If Darius Slay's primary objective is to cover Jefferson, if Slay's primary objective is to cover Jefferson, which he did last year, then how does Addison match up against Job or whoever they put on that other side?
Yep,
that's going to be a key.
I agree. All right,
nice touchdown catch his first game. Kirk Cousins hit him over the middle. On a seam route for a touchdown last week. So he can go. He can flat out go.
I liked him in college at Pitt and at USC. I mean, they needed someone to replace Thielen, and they went out and they made it a priority, and they brought in a really good player. So all right, let's come back and let's dive a little bit more into the Vikings. I'll give you some more numbers and sort of paint the picture of what went on week 1 for them against Tampa Bay, what cost them, kind of where they are. So we'll do that when we come back. Don't go anywhere. That's Derek. I'm Rob. We're Sports Take, JAKIB Sports YouTube Network. All right, Jim Murray and Principal Financial Group are the place that you want to go to invest, to take care of yourself down the line, to take care of yourself in the present day. You work too hard, man. You work too hard for that money not to work for you as well. I can tell you from personal experience, it took me a while to find the right person, but I finally did, and it's Jim Murray and Principal Financial Group. Whether it's retirement planning, 401k review, insurance review, you might have a small business, you need help with the employee benefits, that's another resource that Jim can help you with. I've entrusted my IRA, my 401k rollover with Jim, and I couldn't be any happier. You will be too. Give him a call, 610-996-4751, 610-996-4751. You could also email him as well, Murray, MURRAY, .jim@principal.com. That's Murray.jim@principal.com.